There's one single gesture, just one, and when you embody it, you don't need to say anything else. That gesture shows that you're a high-value woman, and without you even realizing it, it changes everything. It's not what you say. It's not what you give. It's not how hard you try. It's how you step away, how you move, how you choose not to stay where you no longer resonate with your truth. And even though it might seem small, it shakes his unconscious more than any explanation ever could. In this video, I'm going to reveal the one gesture that positions you in his mind, not as an option, but as an unforgettable presence. I'm going to take you from that place where you're doubting, where you're waiting, where you're wondering why he doesn't value you, to the exact point where your energy alone makes it crystal clear that he no longer has access to you unless he comes with respect, clarity, and consciousness. So hit that like button right now and subscribe. It's totally free for you and it supports me immensely. Ready? Let's go. First key. The trap of proving your worth. Why do your efforts to impress him actually make you seem less valuable? Here's the truth that almost no one dares to tell you. The very fact that you feel the need to prove your worth is already projecting that you don't feel it within yourself. And that changes everything. The moment you become obsessed with showing him how good you are, how understanding you can be, how much love you have to give, how interesting it would be to be with you, that's when you've fallen into the trap. And your energy shifts. From queen to applicant, from center to orbit, from high-value woman to a woman who needs to be seen in order to feel worthy. And this is the first silent mistake that ruins a man's desire, choice, and respect for a woman, even if he doesn't know how to explain it. Why? Because what you're doing vibrates like a search for approval, and the masculine unconscious does not respond with attraction to an energy that seems to be asking for permission. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how hard you try. If your intention is to be validated, your vibration drops. Carl Jung explained it without embellishment. What you do to get something from the outside is exactly what you're denying within yourself. And that's what's happening here. From the lens of deep psychology, male desire isn't activated by the woman who gives the most, but by the woman who belongs most fully to herself. And a woman who belongs to herself has nothing to prove. She doesn't need to look perfect, she doesn't need to be liked, she doesn't need to impress, she simply is. She knows who she is. She vibrates from her center, and from there, she simply allows herself to be observed without anxiety. Let me tell you something that happens more often than you'd think. A woman starts dating a man she really likes, and when she sees his interest, she unconsciously activates a pattern. She replies to his messages immediately, even if she's busy. She cooks his favorite dish without him even asking. She agrees to last-minute plan changes to fit his schedule. She asks questions that seem attentive but are really just trying to confirm whether he's still there. On the outside, all of this can look like devotion, interest, good energy, but on a more subtle, energetic level, all of it feels like effort for validation. And that vibration, even if never spoken aloud, is what creates the first crack in how he perceives her value. Because a man unconsciously doesn't think, wow, she tries so hard, she must be valuable. He thinks, if she needs to prove it so much, could it be that she doesn't know her own value? And that, my love, changes everything. Because the masculine doesn't surrender to the woman who gives herself away completely. He surrenders to the woman who has no need to convince him. The woman who is so anchored in her own certainty that she can offer the best of herself without needing to be chosen. And here's the brutal paradox. The more you try to prove you're worthy, the less worthy you appear in the eyes of the unconscious. Because true value isn't shouted, it's vibrated, embodied, and breathed. And this is the sacred principle that separates the woman who impresses him for a moment from the woman who transforms him forever. You're not here to convince anyone of who you are. You're here to remember who you are, and let those who are ready feel it. Let me share a real-life story that illustrates this perfectly. Camilla was starting something with a man who completely dazzled her, and without realizing it, she began losing herself. She stopped making her own plans, started dressing up excessively for every date, and analyzed each text he sent as if it were a secret code. All of it was so she wouldn't mess up, so he'd see her. Until one day, he simply stopped looking for her. Broken inside, she asked him directly, "Was I too much?" And he, not wanting to hurt her, said a sentence that stayed tattooed on her soul. "I feel like everything was too perfect, but I don't know who you are when you're not trying to please me." And that was like an emotional bomb, because Camilla realized that all her effort had screamed the opposite of what she believed. She thought she was showing her value, but her excessive presence was shouting, "Have you seen me yet? Am I enough for you yet?" And that's what pushed him away. From that day on, Camilla stopped proving and started being. She went back to her hobbies, her own rhythm, her writing, and above all, she remembered that value isn't begged for. It's upheld. And the most curious thing? Weeks later, that man came back. But this time, he was the one making the effort, because something in her energy had shifted. She wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. She was shining on her own. And that's when she understood. The gesture that changes everything begins with stopping the need to prove anything. And that's the threshold that prepares you for what comes next. Because if this first key was about deactivating the mistake, the next key is the direct revelation of the precise gesture that emits high-value energy without saying a single word. Get ready, because what you're about to discover is the silent yet fiercely powerful gesture a true woman uses when he gives her mixed signals, cancels at the last minute, or calls his own interest into question. And that gesture doesn't just throw him off. It changes everything. Second key. The Queen's gesture. The art of calmly stepping away when he expects you to fight for him. Let me pause quickly to ask you, from the bottom of my heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. It allows me to keep creating these heartfelt messages, and the best part is, it's completely free for you. Subscribe now, and let's keep going with the most powerful part that's coming up. This is the exact moment when the game changes, when you change, and when he's shaken to his core. Because this isn't just any gesture. It's not a typical response, and that's precisely why it's unforgettable. It's not about ignoring him, it's not about getting revenge, and it's not about manipulation. It's about breaking the emotional pattern that he unconsciously expects you to keep repeating. That pattern where when he pulls away, you lean in even closer. That pattern where he gives you a flimsy excuse and you respond with infinite understanding. That pattern where he says, "Let's see what happens," and you interpret that as an invitation to stay and fight for him. But you're no longer going to follow that script, because you're not the woman who reacts. You're the woman who responds from her throne. And from that place comes the gesture. The Queen's gesture is simple but devastatingly powerful. It's stepping away calmly when he expects you to fight. Listen carefully. When he becomes ambiguous, when he cancels at the last minute, when his energy is no longer clear, you don't bring drama. You don't demand, you don't interrogate, you don't send an emotional 3-paragraph text. You simply step away calmly, with dignity, with presence. Your response is serene, "I understand, take care." And then you vanish. Not with anger, not with sarcasm, not with manipulation, but with a peace so disarming that he's left wondering whether losing you was his decision or his biggest mistake. Because what he was expecting was something else. He was expecting a reaction, a sign that it affected you, proof that he still has power over you. And without saying a word, you show him that he doesn't. That's the gesture. And it's powerful because he doesn't understand it. He feels it. Your silence isn't punishment. Your absence isn't a strategy. It's an energetic declaration. You're no longer vibrating at the level of my center, and I don't negotiate my energy with incoherence. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious is triggered by the unexpected. When a woman breaks the emotional pattern a man anticipates, something in his psyche wakes up. And that's exactly what this gesture does. Because when you don't respond with drama or anxiety or pleading, he's confronted for the first time with his own emptiness, his own inconsistency, his own lack of clarity. And you become the most brutal mirror he's ever faced. A man can ignore your words, he can justify your complaints, he can dodge your tears. But he cannot ignore a silent withdrawal that seeks no punishment, only expansion. And here's the most important part. This gesture only works if it's real. If you're doing it to make him come back, it doesn't work. If you're doing it hoping for a reaction, it loses all its power. This gesture is not for him, it's for you. Because when you choose to step away calmly, you're not trying to control anything. You're reaffirming that your peace is non-negotiable, and that's what changes everything. I'm going to tell you about something Clara experienced. After 3 weeks of sensing that the man she'd been getting to know had pulled back his energy, Clara received a vague message from him. "I've been super busy lately. Let's see if we can meet up this weekend." Clara felt a knot in her stomach. The old version of her would have replied, "Of course, I understand. Let me know when you can." Or worse, "It's fine, but I've noticed you seem distant." Or the classic, "Did I do something wrong?" But Clara took a breath. She remembered who she was. She remembered what her energy was worth, and she simply replied, "Okay, take care." And then, silence. She released the expectation, went back to her plans, kept living her life. She didn't block him, didn't delete him, she simply let go, for real. 3 days later, he showed up again with completely different energy, with respect, with clarity, and with these words, "No one's ever responded to me like that. It made me stop and think about what I'm doing." And that is the Queen's gesture. It doesn't seek a reaction, it causes reflection. Because a high-value woman doesn't need to raise her voice. Her absence already says it all. And you don't make that gesture for him. You make it because you know that every time you stay in a place where your energy isn't respected, you're abandoning yourself. And you're not here to abandon yourself again. You're here to rise. And right there, when this gesture happens without struggle, without performance, without anxiety, something brutal happens on a psychological level. He starts to feel like he's losing you, but without screaming, without words, without goodbyes, and that disarms him. It makes him look at you differently and confront his own emotional truth. Stay close, because in the next key, I'm going to reveal why this gesture impacts him so deeply, how it rewires his mind, and why he perceives you as unique, even if he can't explain why. Third key, the psychology behind the impact. Why does your calm withdrawal wake him up and magnify your value? You might think that when you calmly walk away, you're letting him go. But what you're really doing is activating a part of his psyche that he doesn't even understand himself. Because a man can resist your words, ignore your complaints, minimize your emotions. But he cannot ignore the emptiness left by your energy when it leaves in peace. And this is exactly where psychology explains everything. Carl Jung said that the masculine unconscious projects the anima, the inner feminine energy, as a figure that not only attracts sexually, but also generates expansion, introspection, and transformation. But that expansion doesn't happen with a woman who gives herself away unconditionally, nor with the one who chases, nor with the one who adapts. That expansion is activated by the woman who, when she no longer resonates with what she deserves, walks away in silence, without punishment, without fear, without looking back. That gesture, as we saw earlier, breaks the pattern he expects. But now let's go deeper and understand why it reconfigures him from the inside out. From the standpoint of emotional psychology, the male brain is wired to respond to risk and loss. When something is guaranteed, always available, without limits or boundaries, the neurological system classifies it as safe, stable, non-urgent. And what happens with things that aren't urgent? They're postponed, taken for granted, underestimated. That's why when you're always there, when you justify his mood swings, when you tolerate his lack of clarity, when you keep showing interest even though he doesn't, you're not telling him, "I love you." What your energy is actually saying is, "You can give me less, and I'll still stay." And the masculine unconscious, upon receiving that message, loses the drive to grow, to define itself, to make an effort. Because there's no emotional risk, no possibility of loss. And here's the key. When you perform the Queen's gesture, when you withdraw calmly instead of arguing or chasing, he doesn't feel like you're punishing him. He feels like he's losing you, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. And that triggers a completely different response, because now there's real risk. You're no longer a sure thing, no longer guaranteed. And the most powerful part, you're no longer his automatic source of validation. And that confronts him with his own lack of value. Not because you point it out, but because your absence starts reflecting back to him all the things he stopped nurturing. And if there's one thing that truly impacts a man, it's not you correcting him. It's your energy no longer being available. It's the fact that your vibration, the one that used to calm him, ignite him, nourish him emotionally, is no longer within his reach. Not because you hate him, but because you chose yourself. That rattles him. That touches him in the deepest place, because he can no longer explain what he's feeling. He only knows that something's missing, and that something was you. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. Sophia had spent months in an on-and-off situation with a man who treated her well, but would never commit. Every time they talked about taking things further, he'd say, "Let's see how things go." Lately, it's been hard for me to connect. And Sophia, trying to be empathetic, would respond with understanding. She supported him, waited for him, stayed around. Until one day, he said once again, "Maybe now's not the right time. Let's talk next week." And that sentence didn't trigger her. It woke her up. That night she didn't cry, didn't write to him, didn't explain herself. She simply replied, "I understand. You don't have to let me know. Take care." And she didn't reach out again. She didn't block him, didn't post indirect messages on social media. She simply let go, with full presence. And what happened? A week later, he came back with a long message. Not with excuses, but with clarity. "Since you've been gone, I realized how much space you used to fill, and how little I was giving. If you're still open to talking, I'd like to do things differently." Sophia wasn't expecting it, because she wasn't waiting for him anymore. And that's the most important part. The gesture was genuine, not a strategy to make him come back, but a true declaration of high value. And that's why it held power. Because a real gesture, born from a woman who isn't seeking a reaction, but seeking respect, transcends. And here's the profound message you need to take with you. Your value isn't demonstrated when he's giving you attention. Your true value becomes magnified the moment he realizes he could lose you. And you don't try to stop him. That's where the shift happens. That's where he starts seeing you as someone irreplaceable. That's where the image of you in his mind changes, not as the woman who fought to stay, but as the woman who chose herself over him. And that image never fades. And now that you know why that single gesture impacts him so much, why it breaks his unconscious pattern, and why it wakes him up without a single word, get ready for what's coming next. Because in the next key, I'm going to share a powerful real-life story in which a single phrase, spoken without drama and from a place of calm, completely turned a relationship around. And after that, he never saw her the same way again. Fourth key, the story of the open door. How a simple gesture of not chasing changed the destiny of a relationship. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is do nothing. Not insist, not argue, not chase, simply open the door and don't lock it from the inside with anxiety. This key isn't theory, it's experience. It's flesh, it's soul, it's what happens when a high-value woman stops trying to control the outcome and begins to vibrate with such clarity that her absence says more than 1,000 speeches ever could. Let me tell you the real story of Juliana. A story that seems simple on the surface, but is devastatingly powerful in impact. Juliana had been getting to know Mauro for 3 months. Everything was flowing beautifully. Deep conversations, real emotional connection, genuine attraction. But every time they started getting closer to defining things, he would pull back with ambiguous lines like, "I don't want to put pressure on us. Let's see how things go. I don't want to ruin what we have with labels." And Juliana, wanting things to work out, would go along with it. Not out of weakness, but out of that subtle fear many women feel. The fear of making things uncomfortable, of seeming demanding, of losing something that seemed so good, even if incomplete. So she accepted it. 1 week yes, 1 week no, last-minute plans, inconsistent messages, partial presence. Until one day, after he canceled a date at the last minute with nothing more than, "My day got complicated, let's leave it for next time," something inside Juliana shifted. She didn't explode. She didn't send him a long emotional text. She didn't demand explanations. She just breathed and wrote, "That's fine, Mauro. Take care. I also need clarity so I know where I'm heading." And she said nothing else. No clarifications, no pressure, no follow-ups. She didn't block him. She simply opened the door and didn't close it. But here's the key point. She didn't leave it ajar for him to wander back in with uncertainty. She left it open for her to walk out, without resentment, without urgency, without bitterness. just with dignity. Days went by, and with every day that passed without receiving a message from her, with every Instagram story where she appeared smiling with friends, with every silence that wasn't loaded with punishment, his perception began to shift. Because what once seemed guaranteed now felt distant. What once waited for him was now moving on without him. And the most disorienting part, she wasn't chasing him. A week later, Mauro sent her a message. But Juliana didn't reply right away. Not out of strategy, because she wasn't waiting for him anymore. Her energy was already somewhere else, centered, grounded, in her own life. When they finally talked, he said something to her that she'd never forget. "I don't know why, but your silence hurt more than any argument I've ever had with another woman. I realized you never closed the door, but you were the one who crossed through it first." And there it was, the gesture, the calm withdrawal, the refusal to chase. That moment changed everything. Mauro began showing up more present, more decisive, more clear. Not out of fear of losing her, but because he understood that she wasn't the kind of woman who needed to be convinced to stay. She was the kind of woman who knew how to walk away when the energy wasn't right. And that is what commands respect, inspires commitment, and elevates your value in his eyes. Because when you don't pressure, when you don't dramatize, when you don't put on the show he's expecting, you give him the most uncomfortable yet powerful gift of all, his own reflection. And when that image becomes etched in his mind, the image of a woman who stepped away without destroying anything, he can never see you the same way again. Because you didn't slam the door in his face, you didn't block him, you didn't curse him out. You simply showed him that if he couldn't choose with clarity, you certainly could. And that, my dear, is something not just anyone can do. It's something a woman does, once she understands that her worth doesn't need to be explained. It only needs to be upheld. And that kind of woman, even if it takes him time to react, always remains tattooed in his memory. Because she wasn't the loudest, she was the most conscious. And that consciousness is what leads us to the final point. Because this gesture, this silence, this calm withdrawal, it's useless if you're doing it just to provoke a reaction. It only works when it comes from something far deeper. An inner state that no longer seeks respect from others because it already respects itself. Stay close, because in the next key, you're going to discover why you can't fake this gesture, and how to truly become the woman who embodies it effortlessly. Not as a tactic, but as your new truth. Fifth key, how to cultivate the inner state. So the gesture's authentic. You can't fake being the queen, you have to be the queen. You already know the gesture. You know when to apply it. You've seen the impact it has. But here's where many women stumble. They try to use the gesture without doing the inner work that supports it. And when they do it from a place of strategy, performance, or the hope of let's see if he reacts, not only does it fail, it leaves them feeling even emptier. Because anything done with anxiety disguised as dignity is always noticeable. And the masculine unconscious, let me tell you clearly, might not understand your words, but it always feels your vibration. And if you're pretending to be a high-value woman on the outside, but deep down, you're still waiting for him to come back, to understand, to react, that gesture loses all its power. That's why this final key isn't for him. It's for you. Because if you don't cultivate the right inner state, the act of calmly stepping away will only ever be a mask and not a genuine manifestation of your power. Carl Jung said that true transformation happens when what you do, what you think, and what you feel are aligned. And that's the only way this gesture becomes authentic. When you're no longer doing it to provoke a reaction, but because your soul refuses to accept anything less. So how do you reach that inner state? Let me reveal it to you. This is the invisible protocol of every woman who not only acts like a queen, but becomes one. 1. Stop living in the waiting room of his decisions. If your whole day depends on whether he texted or not, if your mood swings with every message, if you keep your plans open just in case he shows up, you're giving away your center. A high-value woman doesn't wait to be chosen. She chooses. And if someone doesn't resonate with her presence, she steps away. Not out of pride, but out of self-preservation. Your peace is your new priority. 2. Create a life so rich and authentic that you have no time to chase validation. Real power isn't in saying, "I love myself." It's in having a life that makes you fall in love with you. Fill your schedule with yourself, with things you're passionate about, things that connect you, things that remind you that you are so much more than a woman waiting for love. Do things without announcing them. Move without explaining yourself. Heal without broadcasting it. Make your inner world so abundant that nobody else has the power to destabilize it. 3. Learn how to be with yourself without punishment. Many women don't step away because they don't know how to be alone. Silence feels like punishment. If he doesn't write, it feels like the world goes dark. But an integrated woman learns to use silence as alchemy, to be with herself without anxiety, to savor solitude as a temple, not a prison. The queen isn't alone, she's accompanied by her own presence. And that's magnetic. 4. Reprogram your inner language. It's pointless to act strong on the outside if inside you're telling yourself, "He's probably with someone else. I wasn't enough. What if I've lost him forever? Maybe I should have tried harder." Every thought sends out an energetic signal, and if inside you're still talking to yourself like a woman who needs his approval, your energy field will scream scarcity, even if you're silent. Change your inner script. Say, "I didn't lose him. I regained myself. That wasn't love, that was attachment. I don't need to prove my worth, I am my worth. If he left, it's because the universe is clearing my path. My soul has chosen peace. Everything else is extra." 5. Remember that your power lies in your absence, but your magnetism lies in your authenticity. You don't become a high-value woman by acting tough. You become one by being true to yourself, even when it hurts. By not begging, even when you love him. By not going back, even when you feel tempted. By refusing to justify the unjustifiable. By not staying where you're not chosen with certainty. Because you don't need him to see your worth, you only need to make sure you never forget it. And when that inner state becomes natural, the gesture is no longer a decision, it's simply a consequence. You're no longer forcing your absence, you're holding your center. And exactly that is where the magic happens. You don't become unforgettable for what you say, for what you give, or for what you endure. You become unforgettable because one day, you stopped fighting for love and started standing firmly in your truth, without asking for permission. And that woman, the one who's willing to stay alone if necessary, the one who won't return to a place where there's no respect, the one who chooses calm even when it hurts, that's the woman who, without even trying, changes everything. And now that you know the gesture, that you understand its power, and that you've felt how a true woman embodies it from within, get ready. Because what comes next isn't a conclusion. It's a final activation, a phrase, a memory, a truth that will be tattooed on your soul and won't let you go back. Stay tuned because the closing will seal everything. Now you know, it wasn't your effort, it wasn't your words, it wasn't all that you gave. What truly changed everything was that single gesture, that silent, serene, sacred decision not to beg, not to insist, not to stay where your energy isn't clearly seen. That exact moment when, instead of reacting, you stepped away in peace, and without saying a word, you said more than all the messages you could ever have sent. Because your high value wasn't shouted, it was embodied. It wasn't proved, it was upheld. It wasn't forced, it became real. And that is the woman he never forgets. Not because of what she did, but because of how she vibrated. Because of how she knew when to leave without complaining. Because of how she chose her peace over her fear. Because of how she left the door open, but crossed to the other side alone, without waiting for him to follow. And now, it's your turn. Not to keep pretending that your worth depends on someone else, but to remember that your mere presence, fully embodied, fully grounded, fully lived, already says it all. Comment below with conviction. My energy speaks louder than my words. I have already chosen myself. Do it as an act of liberation, as a symbol of your new standard, as a promise to yourself. Because from today on, you don't need to do more. You only need to be who you already are, and let the world decide if it's ready to rise to meet you. If this message resonated with your soul, it's time to take the next step. Subscribe now to keep elevating your vibration with every new video. Give this content a like so more souls can hear what has freed you today. Share this video with anyone you know who also needs to let go to heal. And of course, leave your declaration in the comments so this message becomes imprinted in your energy. But above all, don't leave just yet. There's so much more waiting for you. Dive into the other videos here on the channel and keep expanding your energy and your power. I'll see you in the next video.